Just want to remind you of several things. We want to congratulate Ted and Marcia Buttram. They have a new granddaughter, Macy Grace Buttram, born yesterday. The proud parents are Kevin and Gina, and the big sister is Meredith. So be sure and tell Marcia on Sunday how proud you are for her. Also, you'll see on the board to my right, you'll see in addition to that board, Coleman Young was baptized Monday evening here at the building, and we are certainly proud of Coleman. If you hadn't met Coleman, he's right back there at the back on the left. We're excited that their family is with us, Bradley and Jennifer, but be sure and congratulate Coleman. Sunday night after our PM worship, we're going to have a get together and wish good tidings to Derek and Sue as they will be leaving next week. But we'll bring finger foods, drinks, desserts, and we'll just have a good time visiting with them. I want to remind all of you that are participating in Last to Leaders, the first deposit is due by February the 1st. Also, if you'll be getting in those 2023 surveys, be getting in any changes to the membership book, scarves, hats, and gloves for the 5th Annual Downtown Project, they need to be here by Sunday, and the time will be announced for that activity on Monday. Also, the zone hostess, if you can be signing up for that. The Barnabas Project, this is for 2-year-olds through seniors. Please be getting that in by this Sunday. If you have any questions, see Shawanda Medley. And then Sunday afternoon, it'll be the baby tea in honor of Rachel Biffle. So I hope that as many of you ladies will participate in that. Next Wednesday night, before service, everybody that can help with Isaiah's call, we'll meet there at 5 o'clock. We've got several we want to continue to remember on our sick list. I don't have any changes other than what's on the opportunity worksheet, but please remember each of these. We've got one card to read to the Dear Petersville family. We want to thank you all for the calls, text, and lovely meal that was prepared for our family during this difficult time. No amount of words can express how much it meant to us. Please keep our family in your prayers for the days ahead. From George, Teresa, Marlowe, and Matthew Williams, and we certainly want to continue to remember them. We also want to remember Brother Lewis and Betty. They have a granddaughter that's now in Australia, Braden Jackson. She'll be teaching over there for a couple of years. So please remember her in your prayers each and every day. I'm going to turn it over to Doug at this time.
Go ahead and mark your books, number 671. Number 671, this is our song of encouragement here in a few moments. After you have that mark, turn number 523. 523. All stand for sing, please. I know the Lord will find a way for me. I know the Lord will find a way for me. If I walk
Genesis chapter 26. Open up your Bibles this evening to Genesis 26. This time last week we were reading a passage from Genesis 11 in our daily Bible reading. And for those of you that are keeping up with that, today there is a reading that gets us into discussions about Isaac and some of the things that begin to take place in his life as well. Caused me to do some reflecting and some thinking. So before we get into Genesis chapter 26, I want to ask the question, just how much influence, how much connection is there between fathers and sons? How much of a difference is made? How much overlap from one generation to the next? I ran across this story. There was an old man who lived at the edge of a forest. And as he grew older, like so many others, he began losing his hair. Finally, as an aged man, completely bald, he called his children together. "Look at my hair. It used to be so magnificent, but it's completely gone now. But look outside at the forest. It's lovely and full of trees, but if we don't take care of it, sooner or later the entire forest will be as bare as my head. I want you to promise me that after I'm gone, every time one of those trees is cut down, you'll plant another one in my memory. Tell your descendants to do the same. It will be our family's legacy and duty to keep the forest strong." And so they did. Every time a tree was cut down, the children and then their children after them for generations would plant a new one in that man's memory. And thus the forest was preserved for centuries, all because of one man and his receding hairline. Hair. I know, I'm sorry. I'll follow it up with one even worse. There was a guy who confessed he'd lost so much hair over the years he was practically bald, but, he said, "I still carry around my favorite comb. I just can't seem to part with it." Right? I thought it was appropriate to have a couple of dad jokes while we're talking about fathers and sons, but to get us back on the point, this generational overlap. In Genesis 26, what we see is the power of the bloodline. Isaac finds himself in this chapter following in his father's footsteps in many different ways. Some are good and some not so much. In verse 1 it says, "There was a famine in the land besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham." So here we see life circumstances mirroring from one generation to the next. Abraham lived during a famine. Isaac lives during a famine. The same way that God appeared to Abraham in Genesis chapters 12 and again in chapter 15. In verse 2 of this chapter, God appears again to make the same covenant with Isaac that he did with Abraham, reminding us this is the lineage of promise. The Lord appeared to him in verse 2 and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I will tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to your father Abraham." In Gerar, this land where he will settle during the famine, if you look down in verse number 17, Isaac will redig the wells that his father Abraham had dug a generation before. Isaac departed and camped in the valley of Gerar, settling there, and Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after his death. And he gave them the names that his fathers had given them. So Isaac goes back and he sees that the best place to dig those wells is the same place that his father had dug them a generation before. But also in this same region, and there's a whole lot more we could say about this, but I just find it interesting that he would act like his father in a negative way. earlier in the chapter, up in verse number 6, where he would lie to the ruler of that region. His name was Abimelech, or rather probably his title was Abimelech. Because it tells us in verse 6 that he settled in Gerar, and when the men of that place asked him about his wife, he said, "She's my sister," for he feared to say my wife, thinking the men of this place will kill me because of Rebekah, because of her attractive appearance. And it's ironic that Isaac does the exact same thing here in Genesis 26, that he did not know that his own father had done with a previous Abimelech, a generation before. Abraham had done the same exact thing. We learn good and bad things from our families growing up. But at some point, we become responsible for the choices that we make. You know, Isaac wasn't even born when Abraham and Sarah told the lie that they told to Abimelech. And yet he finds himself following right along in their footsteps when he has the opportunity to do something different. What a shame. What about us? How are you like your parents? In the good ways and in the bad. What do you do because you've seen that that is what works best? I believe Isaac followed in Abraham's footsteps intentionally when he found the places where these wells needed to be dug. And he realized there's no better place to have a well than where my father did it before. And so he brings them back. He gives them the same name. But then what do you do simply because it's the only thing you've ever seen, whether it works well or not? What can we do this week to change the things that need to be changed and to preserve the things that need to be held on to, need to be cherished, need to be kept? As you read your Bible this week, as you go to Bible class tonight, know that God has given us every opportunity to learn from those who've gone before us, to follow in their footsteps where it's good and pleasing, but also to make changes when it's needed, no matter how difficult that can be. And tonight, if you need help to do either of those things, before we go to our classes tonight, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to ask for that help in whatever way you see fit. If you'd like to do that, would you come forward right now as we stand together and as we sing?
Good evening. Can y'all hear me in the back? I won't take your word. I can hear myself. So that must be a good sign. I'm deaf in one ear and can't hear out the other. So if I can hear me, y'all got to hear me. I already had my patience tested tonight, and I've got to learn forgiveness from my fellow brother. The gall of that preacher talking about bald-headed people. Now, I'm going to tell y'all, if I wanted to, I could have hair. I think Laverne may still have it, but when Josie Sharp's husband died, she left him his wig. And I probably could find that. When Joshua was about 2 or 3, maybe not even that old, I still had some hair that I combed over. And I came in one day, and all 3 of them were all over the place. And I told Sherry right then, I said, I'm cutting it off. I don't want to embarrass my son when he gets in school. I went and shaved it off, came back. I said, what do you think? She said, when are you going to shave it? I already shaved it. She couldn't tell the difference. So anyway, y'all pray for the preacher that he be careful about talking about bald-headed people. There's nothing wrong with being bald-headed. It saves me about 5 minutes in the shower every morning. I wash and dry at the same time. So, but anyway, it's good to see everyone here tonight. Y'all are the cream of the crop, and I really appreciate you more than you really will ever know. We've been talking, or we're going to be talking for the next few weeks about the lessons from the devotional book, His Family. We're talking about the church, okay? His family. We're part of that family. On Sunday mornings, we're talking about godly homes, and so both of them tie in with one another. And so I think it's good that we can study both of them. And I'm looking forward to the lesson tonight. Last week, we actually shared a lesson from Jeff Jenkins. Now, if you were here back in October, the Jenkins brothers, the Jenkins Institute, they came here and they did a leadership conference for us. People, that was a treat. If you were there on Friday and Saturday and got to hear the lessons, it was really good. And then they preached for us on, one of them taught class on Sunday morning, the other one preached for us on Sunday morning. Great guys, great. They do a great work. And if you look at your budgets that we handed out the other day, we're actually supporting them this time. We had some money to come available to us from some other things that we had once supported, and we decided, hey, let's help those guys out. They're doing a tremendous work, and we want to encourage them any way we can. But last week we shared a lesson by Jeff Jenkins, and he talked about the mind of God. And the mind of God, he wants us to have the same thing so that we are part of his family. I mean, it's amazing how God designed his church family. It's amazing how he designed our personal families, our physical families, but he wants us to be part of his family as well. And that's what we've been talking about on Sunday mornings by talking about having godly homes. So they intertwine with each other. Tonight we're going to be taking a lesson from Jeff Jenkins, from the devotionals that he has written for this week. And I encourage you to read those devotionals. They're really good. I'm going to share some of what he's shared, but I'm going to go a little bit differently because I don't want to sit here and read what they're telling you and then you go home and read it again. You can do that for yourself. But probably the thing that I took away most from that leadership conference was Jeff on Friday night. As he's beginning the conference, he asked a very obvious question. But sometimes the obvious kind of hits us out of the blue, doesn't it? Question is, do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Duh. That's why we're here. But he made us stop and think that night. Why are we part of God's church? Why are we here? And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. You know, it's obvious to me that y'all believe that. The people that are viewing online also believe that. And by the way, a special shout out to Jerry Montgomery. Got to talk to him yesterday. He's with us every time online when he can. But you take home from church what you put into it, whether it be worshiping here or worshiping at home. Family went to church one Sunday and they're going home, and the dad keeps looking at his son sitting in the back seat, and the son's sad. They just come from church, and he keeps on, and the dad finally said, "I'm tired of asking, what is wrong?" He said, "My teacher said that we need to make sure that we're going home or going to a Christian family home." And he said, I'm used to y'all. Okay? Kind of scary. You know, we want our kids to know that they're in a Christian home. Another family decided that it was time that they started going to church. So one Sunday morning they all got ready, and the mother, dad, daughter, and son all went to church. And they're in the car going home, and Dad said, "Man, that sermon about put me to sleep. It was dry as dust." The mother said, "Yeah," and she said, "the singing was way off key." The daughter said, "Well, whoever led that prayer must have thought they were trying to set a world's record. It took forever." The little boy was grinning. He said, he said, "It was a pretty good deal." He said, "All four of us got a piece of cracker and some grape juice, and it only cost Dad $1." So, you take home what you put into church, don't you? It's that way wherever you are. And so that's what we're going to kind of focus in on tonight, is looking at how we can really be the church of the Christ. That's the title of your devotional this week. And if you'll notice in your book, of Christ is put in quotation marks. Think about it a little bit. What does church mean to you? If we were to ask the world, what do you think they would respond? Bunch of hypocrites. We talked about that the other day. Well, the church is that building down the road. I don't know. I've never had any experience with the church. I don't know what it's about. You would get a variety of answers if you asked people out in the world what church is. You know, good possibility that they would just say it's just a building. But the church is more than just a building. The church is you and me. This is a building. We're a congregation, but you and I are the church. And that's what I want you to take away from it tonight. Now, it's very important that we have the congregation. And I think we were really reminded of that back when COVID hit. When we had to stay home. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, COVID was actually a blessing to me. I missed us being together here at church. But you know what? I got to know this church better because we weren't meeting. The day that we had the meeting to decide what we were going to do because of COVID, I mean, it hits all of a sudden, and all of a sudden we're hearing reports from different churches that we just can't meet as a public group. It's too dangerous. It's too risky. And I get a call at work. Hey, Gary, can you meet us? We need to talk. And so we talked a little bit, and we made the decision that we didn't really have a decision to make. We had to, not have public worship service. It was a tough decision, but it had to be made. But that day, when we were talking about what it could do to this congregation, we made a decision that we were going to call every member of this church at least once a week while we weren't meeting. We took the roster and we actually had 7 pages. The 5 elders got a page, the 2 ministers got a page. And we started off, and Gary, you got page 1. Lewis, you got page 2, and we went down. Next week, hey, Gary, you got page 2. Lewis, you got page 3. I don't know if y'all cared or not, but I got to talk to every one of y'all. And I got to know this congregation a little bit better, because it wasn't a call where we just go, hey, it's Gary. I've got the duty to call you. Are you okay? Good. Talk to you later. How many of those phone calls, Lewis, turned into 5 or 10 minute conversations? The majority. And I'm not saying this bragging on us. A lot of churches complained that they didn't get their membership back when churches started back. People, we probably got about 85 to 90% of our people back. And I feel like it was because we took the opportunity to be the church and check on one another. And it wasn't just the elders and the preachers doing the calling. It was y'all calling one another as well. People, that's what the church is about. And that's what we're going to kind of touch on tonight and see what lessons that we can take from that and maybe take something to help us out a little bit. Jeff in his lessons this week is going to hit on a lot of different things. He'll talk about what's in a name, and he'll talk about, using your talents and us all being different. And our church family is a whole lot like our own physical families, isn't it? Lewis has got a brother named Jimmy. Jimmy and Lewis are both great guys. Jimmy was an elder for a while as well. He had to step down because there was only 2 elders where he was, and the other one passed away, so Jimmy steps down. And many of y'all know Jimmy McAdams. He's a great guy. But you know what? Jimmy and Lewis are different. A lot of y'all know Ronnie Pinnell. Ronnie Pinnell and myself are different. Not only am I better looking, I've got more personality. I'm not stubborn.
And you're so nice.
And I'm naive or humble about it. Yeah. No, I mean, but think about your own siblings, or think about other people's kids. Sherry and I used to talk about it all the time. Back before Joshua come along, Ronnie's 3 boys were basically our 3 boys. And I mentioned that the other day. Aunts and uncles have a special bond with their nieces and nephews. And all 3 of Ronnie's boys were just as different as daylight and dark. Have y'all heard that saying before? Different as daylight and dark? Caden Cooper different? Yeah. And so we're that way with our physical family, but we're also that way with our church family as well, aren't we? I'm not going to call names. I'll get in trouble. But we got some ornery brothers and sisters in Christ, don't we? I'm not necessarily saying they go here. I'm just talking about some other places. But we do. We have some brothers and sisters in Christ that we may have to struggle just a little bit more to get along with. But you know what? Just like our physical families, we need to make sure we get along with one another. You know, Ronnie, my brother, is 9.5 years older than I am. And growing up, he used to make my life miserable. That was his job, and he did it very well. But if anybody else tried to pick on me, guess who was going to defend me first? It was going to be my brother. And we do the same thing for each other now. Our bond has gotten closer as we've gotten older. You know, my family went from 3 boys in the house to 1 in less than a month, about a month and a half time. Lost my twin brother in August of '72, and Ronnie got married in September. But we're close. I know Ronnie was trying to tell me that we would be close. He would always be there for me. And he said, "Do you need to ask me anything?" I said, "Yeah, can I have your bedroom?" Made him mad, but he let me have it. And anyway. But our physical families have differences, and you know, we all have to establish our own identity. We do that in our church family as well. We've got people that are talented in so many ways. So many of y'all have got so many more talents than I do, and I appreciate your using those talents to God's glory. That's what it's all about. We're to grow with one another. And then we're to take that growth and we're to take it and shine it out into the world. And we're going to get into a little bit of that here just in a little bit. As part of God's family, we are each going to show our own personalities, but we are commanded to be Christ-like, God's children of Christ. That's what it boils down to. We've got the perfect example of how we ought to be as the church individually. You know, what are some of the characteristics that a follower of Jesus should have? I just come across these the other day. I thought they were pretty good. One, we're walking with Jesus. Okay? We're following his footsteps. We're walking with Jesus. We know and live the Scriptures. Those devotional books that we give you is one way of us encouraging you to love the Scriptures. It may only be one verse per devotional, but at least it gets you into the Scriptures and gets you to learn them a little bit. As the church, as followers of Christ, we've got to be out in our community as well. And people, y'all are out in this community more than you realize. I've shared this with you before, but I don't know how many times I've been at work and something will come up about church. They'll ask me where I go, and they'll say, "Oh, hey, what happened this afternoon? You know Patrick Mitchell?" "Yeah, I know Patrick Mitchell. He's one of my good friends." They started bragging on him. People, Patrick's out in this community. He's developed a good reputation just like y'all have. It's very important that we are out in community. Another thing that makes us followers of Christ, we are to be engaging with those who don't know Christ. And people, we got a lot of people in this community that don't know Christ. Saying goes, you may be the only sermon that some people see or hear. We've got to be out there because there's a lost and dying world outside these 4 walls, and it's our responsibility to share the good news. And we're supposed to reproduce spiritual generations. And that's what we've been talking about a whole lot on Sunday mornings. We're trying to develop godly homes. That means that we're trying to train the generations coming up after us. You know, and you know, think about how far back your family goes as members of the church. Some of you are first generation members of God's church, of Christ's church. And some of you can trace your genealogy back 4 or 5 generations, if not longer. It's our responsibility to pass it on to the next generation and then the generation after that. So we have a lot to do to be part of God's church, to be that part of Christ. So trying to come up with a way I want to go through this lesson tonight, there's so many different paths I could have followed. But I kept coming back to the same thing. We need a good example of what we're supposed to be of Christ's church, and the best example I know is Jesus. If we're going to be part of His church, we've got to take on His traits. We've got to take on His genes, if you would, and apply those to our lives and grow individually, but also grow as a church family and be the best example that we can. I want to share just a few areas tonight that come to my mind came to my mind as I was preparing this lesson about what we can learn from Christ. And it's no random order or no set order. As these come down, I threw them on my paper and wrote them down. The first thing that came to my mind was that we have to be servers of other people. Okay? Mark chapter 10, verse 45 will tell you, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give His life a ransom for many." I'm not going to read it again tonight because I've read it to you Sunday, and you'll probably hear me read it again a bunch. Philippians chapter 2, starting with verse 5 and going through verse 11. Philippians 2 is my favorite chapter. That's the reason I keep referring to it. But in Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 11, it talks about how Christ left the glory of heaven and came to this earth and became a servant. We don't have kings and queens here in the United States, but just say we did, and the king told his son, "You know what? I'm going to take your authority away from you, and I want you to go to Florence, Alabama, and live and work among those people." It wouldn't happen today, would it? Too much prestige and what have you. Jesus knew from almost the beginning of time that He was going to be sent to this world to become a servant. And He was going to be put on a cross and die the most terrible death imaginable. Jesus comes to this world and He fulfills that. And He teaches His disciples to be the same way. What did He do the night before His crucifixion? He washed their feet. He, the King of Kings, washes the feet of His humble servants. Powerful, powerful lesson there. The older I get, the more that means to me. You know, we don't come to this world to be served. We come to this world to serve. The world's going to teach you something totally different, though, isn't it? Watch the world of advertising. Have it your way. That Burger King Whopper I was talking about the other day. I have to have it my way because I don't like it the way they fix it. I'm picky. Nike, just do it. You go on and on. You deserve a break today. And I'll tell you, if you go down here to McDonald's, I'm going to give you a friendly piece of advice. When you pull up to that drive-through speaker, take about 3 seconds and to listen to the person on the other end. And if you think they're going to mess your order up, just order chicken McNuggets. They can't mess those up. Again, I'm picky. If I want a hamburger a certain way, I can tell you in 3 seconds whether that person's going to get that message or if I'm going to get the wrong sandwich. And so you just pick the McNuggets and they can't mess it up. But this world expects you to be served, doesn't it? And they teach you that. And Christ teaches us just the opposite. We're to serve one another. Is that always easy? I've worked with the public going on 45 years. I used to get bad paper cuts tearing tickets at the movie theater, so I had to leave there and go to Milner Russian. And yesterday was one of them days. You wanted to smile at them and just smack them upside the head, but you can't. You have to be a servant. You have to take it. And you deal with it the best you can. It's like I've told you, the old saying, the customer's always right. That somebody lied. It's not that way. But we're to serve one another. We're to show them that we're in the business of being Christ-like. Joshua, I'm not going to say he volunteered, but he had to volunteer when he was in college and in high school to do service projects for other people. I like that. I think kids need to be put to that task. And I'm so glad that they go down here once a month to Isaiah's call and pack those baskets up. They need to learn servanthood at an early age. So pass that along to your kids. The second thing that came to my mind this week was compassion. Christ was full of compassion. Turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 37. Very familiar passage to us. It's one we've heard several times, but let's go through and read it. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure to eat. And they went away in a boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them and ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When they went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. He goes on and he tells his disciples, "Hey, let's feed them." 5,000? That's a lot of chicken McNuggets. We don't have that much. It would cost about a year's salary to feed that group, and even then they're not going to get enough to eat. And Jesus uses that to perform one of his greatest miracles, where he fed them fish and bread, and they were full. But he had compassion on them. Not only did he have compassion on those 5,000, he also had compassion on his own disciples. They had been out. He had sent them out to evangelize. And they come back, and he knew that they needed some compassion. You ever done any kind of mission work? Some of the greatest stuff you can do. But it can also be some frustrating work as well. And Christ knew that his disciples needed to be pumped up a little bit. And he was going to do that. That's the reason they went off to a desolate place. We have to have compassion. Throughout the book of Mark, you'll see that Jesus had compassion on different people. John 13, verses 34 and 35, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By all this they will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." People notice compassion, don't they? Go to the emergency room. Watch a nurse that has compassion working with somebody. They get bragged on, don't they? People need that compassion when they're ill. We live in a world that has a lot of hurting people. And if we can show them a little compassion, it goes a long way. I still think about that sermon that Adam preached back in December about the church being a hospital for sinners and people we are. And you and I have had to take advantage of that hospital, haven't we? We've needed that ourselves. Have compassion with one another. The third thing that I think that we can take from the life of Christ that will help us out tremendously is that Jesus was prayerful. He knew the importance of taking time to speak with God. I hope you do that. It's hard to find time to pray a lot of times, isn't it? My praying time most of the time is going to work in the morning in the truck, depending on traffic. This morning was not a good praying morning. I mean, it was crazy. I don't know what happened. I left about the same time. But take time to pray every day. You'll read throughout the New Testament that Jesus took time to go off by himself and pray. People, you need to do that. I don't know when you do your praying. I do mine in the truck a lot of times. Do a lot of praying right before I go to bed at night or go to sleep at night. Somebody said, well, does it count if you go to sleep while you're praying? Yeah, it does. Think about your kids, your grandkids. They're sitting in your lap and they're all excited. They're telling you a story. Next thing you know, they're asleep. Do you go, man, that's pitiful. They didn't finish the story and I wanted to hear it. No, we understand. God understands when we fall asleep. Maybe it's His peace that's making us go to sleep. Sometimes we have to have that peace, don't we? A lot of things will keep us awake at night. I'm kind of tickled. The book that we're studying in the men's class on Wednesday night is Awake at Night. And it's talking about elders making decisions about the church and how you stay awake at night. Elders are not the only ones that stay awake at night. Y'all do too. You get things on your mind, you can't go to sleep, that's when you take it to God. Jesus was very prayerful. He had so many prayers throughout the New Testament, but I love the one in John chapter 17. In John 17, Jesus is getting ready to be crucified. The time is very near. And this is one of those times when he needs to go to God and talk to Him. He'll talk to Him the night before He's crucified in prayer 3 different times. Very powerful prayers. But in John chapter 17, you're going to read that Jesus is talking to God. He says, God, you sent me to this world to fulfill your purpose, and we've done it. I'm glad your will's been done. You've blessed me with some good people on this earth to be your servants. Please watch after them. Keep them safe. They're going to be in this world, and you need to watch over them. But look down at verse 20. I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be one in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. People, what's special about verse 20 is he's praying for you and me. A 2,000-year-old prayer for you and me. That's pretty awesome. We're to be prayerful. Do you pray for your children? You better. I like that sign that Adam has on out there. It says, pray without ceasing, because Satan is praying, P-R-E-Y-I-N-G, without ceasing. The world's after our kids. They're after your grandkids. They're after your great-grandkids. You better be praying for them. And pray for the generations that will come after you are no longer here. You know, you want to keep that generational flow continuing. So far we've learned that to be like Christ, we have to serve.
That